Frank Zappa never needed chaos to shock people. Chaos followed him anyway. This was a man who stared down the music industry, mocked politics to its face, and turned his own home into a rotating laboratory of sound, discipline, and psychological endurance. Laurel Canyon wasn't just a place to live, it was a proving ground, and not everyone survived it. The myth of Frank Zappa often focuses on his intelligence, his humor, his impossible compositions. But buried beneath the legend is a colder truth. Zappa was not kind to musicians who didn't understand one thing: this was never about them. From the outside, Zappa looked like a free spirit. Long hair, strange humor, music that sounded like it had been stitched together from different dimensions. But inside his working world, order ruled everything. Precision mattered. Structure mattered. Obedience to the vision mattered more than raw talent. The music industry chews people up. Zappa knew that early. He saw artists reshaped into products, smoothed down until nothing dangerous remained. He refused that path entirely. He didn't want hits. He didn't want approval. He wanted control. Total control. And that control extended to every musician who stepped into his orbit. Zappa's bands were famous for one thing besides the music: constant turnover. Faces changed. Names disappeared. Players arrived confident and left humbled. Not because they weren't skilled, but because they misunderstood the job. Many musicians came in believing they were joining a band. They thought they would contribute personality, flair, maybe even ego. They were wrong. What they were joining was a system, a machine designed to execute one mind's ideas with surgical accuracy. Zappa's compositions were traps for the careless. Complex rhythms, sudden shifts, parts that looked impossible on paper and felt worse on stage. This wasn't rock and roll freedom. This was discipline disguised as madness. Some musicians tried to bend the rules. They added notes. They stretched parts. They treated the material like a platform for self-expression. Zappa noticed everything. And once he noticed, the clock started ticking. To him, this behavior wasn't creativity. It was disrespect. Zappa believed that music could be absurd, satirical, even ridiculous, but the execution had to be perfect. Sloppiness wasn't charming. Ego wasn't impressive. Individual spotlight seeking was a disease. What separated those who stayed from those who vanished was not virtuosity. It was alignment, the ability to suppress personal ambition in service of something larger. Many couldn't do it. Life inside Zappa's touring bands wasn't just musically demanding, it was psychologically brutal. Long rehearsals, constant scrutiny, no room for laziness, no tolerance for attitude. You were expected to know your role and stay inside it. And if you didn't, you were gone. There was no debate, no emotional farewell, no second chances. Zappa had spent too much time fighting record labels, critics, and cultural stupidity to babysit musicians who wanted attention. He had already built his world. Anyone entering it had to adapt or disappear. Over time, Zappa developed a reputation. Some saw him as ruthless. Others saw him as unfair. But the musicians who truly understood him knew the truth. This wasn't cruelty. This was survival. Zappa didn't believe in democracy inside art. He believed in authorship. The music existed because he imagined it, because he wrote it, because he heard it fully formed before anyone else touched an instrument. That meant the final result had to match that internal vision exactly. Not approximately. Not emotionally. Exactly. Young musicians often learned this lesson too late. They arrived excited, intimidated, proud, and then slowly realized this wasn't a collaboration in the traditional sense. It was an audition that never ended. Every rehearsal was a test. Every performance was a judgment. One misstep could brand you as unreliable. One act of ego could erase months of trust. Zappa wasn't impressed by rebellion. He was impressed by control. Those who stayed long-term learned to disappear inside the music. They mastered their parts. They stopped trying to shine. They accepted that anonymity within genius was the price of entry. And those musicians often became better players because of it. Sharper, more disciplined, more aware. Zappa didn't break musicians. He filtered them. By the time he reached the later stages of his career, this process was automatic. He could spot the wrong personality immediately. Technical skill meant nothing without the right mindset. Being able to play fast didn't matter if you couldn't listen. And listening, in Zappa's world, meant submission to the composition. This iron control explains why his catalog remains unmatched. Album after album that refuses to age. Music that still confounds, still challenges, still irritates people decades later. Because it was never compromised. Frank Zappa didn't care about being liked. He cared about being correct, about realizing an idea fully, even if it meant alienating collaborators along the way. His harsh standards weren't a personality flaw, they were a defense mechanism, a way to protect something fragile and dangerous in an industry designed to flatten everything sharp. In the end, his rule was brutally simple. You were either inside the vision or outside the door. Talent couldn't save you. Reputation couldn't save you. Ego definitely couldn't save you. Only discipline did. And that is why playing with Frank Zappa wasn't a dream gig for everyone. It was a trial by fire, a test of humility, a lesson in how art survives only when someone is willing to guard it mercilessly. Zappa did exactly that, and the music still stands because of it.